Thanks, Alex. The leftist Democratic Party front, MoveOn.org, is set to hijack the Occupy Wall Street protest this week, which is pretty ironic given the fact that the Obama administration is a creature of Wall Street itself. Now, we're standing here in front of City Hall in Austin, Texas, just days before the Occupy Austin protest are set to take place. We wanted to get the public's opinion on this protest movement and see who they feel is behind it all.
Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, we don't have a whole lot of demonstrations happening in the United States, as far as I know, and this one seems to be a pretty big one. So it's nice to see people coming together and fighting for something they believe in.
It's people who are upset with the financial situation, with the bank bailouts, with the lack of repercussions.
I think the bankers are getting way too greedy.
People talking about freedom, ending the Federal Reserve, talking about the crimes committed by Ben Bernanke and other people in the highest echelons of our government.
Not sure what their objective or goal is, except I've heard they're against corporate greed. Well, so is everybody. So what is the point, really? I don't understand.
I think it's very significant. I think we as a people have to pay attention to movements like this, because what it says is that folks are feeling disenfranchised and they're feeling like their government and their leaders aren't representing them.
Where do you think Obama stands on the Occupy Wall Street protest?
Well, that's interesting. One of the things I was trying to find myself this morning was whether or not I could figure out who was behind this. Yeah. And my first thought was the Democratic Party. I'm a Democrat. And I support Obama, but I was just curious as to what, generally what's going on.
Obama is a corporate puppet. He opposes the people. He is for arresting and pepper spraying all these protesters you see in New York that are unlawfully being detained and arrested.
I mean, in terms of whether he supports Wall Street, I mean, it's hard not to when you're the president, because they're kind of the place where all that, all the funding is coming from.
His heart is probably in the right place, and he would like to do what he says he wants to do and raise taxes on some of the higher earners. But at the same time, realistically speaking, there are people who donate to his campaign who are part of that demographic. So it's probably a lot more complicated than most of us are willing to admit it is for him.
Obama stands for the corporate interest. He's not on our side. He's pay-to-play figure, as we saw with his Blagojevich scandal. So he's enabled Ben Bernanke and the Federal Reserve. We need to unelect Obama and abolish the Federal Reserve.
Just the same thing that the Bush administration and the Clinton administration and then the Bush administration did before that. It's just like a big revolving door. All those guys that work for the big banks, whatever party they're affiliated with, they're circled into the White House, into the government, and then after that term for that president is up, those people go back to working for the banks. They're just like a big circle.
Some of us feel that MoveOn.org and those kind of organizations might be attempting to kind of divert the attention to Wall Street and away from the Federal Reserve, who many people feel is more responsible for this whole economic situation. What are your thoughts on that?
I could certainly see that being a possibility. I think there's responsibility to bear all the way around. The folks that control Wall Street are some of the most influential folks in terms of the federal government, and vice versa. The federal government is probably the most influential force in terms of what happens at Wall Street. I think you can apply equal pressure all the way around. The bottom line is things have to change.
I mean, I'm not a big fan personally of MoveOn.org and the things they support, but I will say, we got to have a big tent, welcome anyone that's protesting with us, but at the same time, a lot of this will be co-opted. You're right. We look at the Tea Party, what's happened with the Koch brothers and the mainstream press really diluting that movement entirely by corporate power. So yeah, that is something we need to watch out for. It's a great point.
You want this to be exactly what it was established. Occupy Austin, Occupy Wall Street, Occupy any city USA. Is really about a general movement to stand up and be heard and to say that you are not going to be trampled by your government, by big business.
Recently, Alex Jones announced the campaign to occupy the Fed in a bid to focus the Occupy Wall Street movement on the real enemies of the American people, the Federal Reserve, and not let the protests be manipulated by Democratic Party front groups who are a huge part of the Wall Street establishment. I'm Darren McBreen for InfoWars Nightly News.